You and your wife both have a CIA background. She
Right.
wasn't an operative though, so I don't know if you guys are like constantly trying to evaluate each other, like take each other into the perfect setting. But how do you guys deploy these, knowing that you have to have psychological awareness, savvy to, in my opinion, have a high functioning marriage. How much of this do you bring into your relationship?
We bring a lot of it in. It's silly to not bring it in. We both joined CIA because we love this stuff. We independently joined the agency. We independently were vetted, recruited, trained, and brought in. We didn't meet each other until we were in complementary fields inside CIA, right? And then after meeting each other, after building a relationship, after falling in love, after getting married, then CIA turned us into a tandem operational couple because it was just the perfect cover. Two CIA officers married in real life can basically operate anywhere with very little outside support. So that was our nexus. That's where we were kind of forged in fire. Now, as business owners, because my wife is a co-owner of the business, and parents and spouses outside of CIA, we really lean heavily on the tools and the language that CIA gave us to understand human psychology. Probably the most impactful piece of everything they gave us that plays into our marriage, our relationship now. I was telling you about the 3 different developmental periods, right? 0 to 7, 7 to 13, 13 to 25, and over. We have this concept at CIA that we call the 1,000 personalities. Everybody has a core personality, that under-resourced, drained of all, all excess time, money, and energy. This is who a person is. But then you have 1,000 personalities that you can play, depending on what the scale is of your time, energy, and money. So this idea of 1,000 personalities has been incredibly valuable in marriage because it makes it so that you can be gracious and forgiving to any of the 1,000 personalities that present themselves at any time that you are also in one of your 1,000 personalities. And it really boils down to these, for us, my wife and I, it boils down to these 3 developmental phases. Sometimes she's dealing with me and I am little Andy. Andy 0 to 7. Sponge Andy, hurt child Andy. My father died before I was born, so sometimes she's talking to Andy, who was raised by just his mom and his grandma. And when she's talking to that Andy, or when that is the Andy responding to some disaster in life or business, right? She can call it out. She can say, hey, I'm not trying to hurt little Andy's feelings here, right? I need to talk to adolescent Andy. I need to talk to puberty Andy, right?
Does that wind you up in the moment? Like, does that annoy you, or are you like, oh, word, thank you?
That's exactly what it is. Now, because we speak the same language, because I speak to her little Jihi, right? My wife's name is Jihi. I speak to her little Jihi. I speak to her teenage Jihi. I speak to her grown-up Jihi. I speak to her CIA Jihi. I speak to her mom Jihi. I speak to her wife Jihi. I speak to her business Jihi. And now we're not trying to point fingers and trigger each other, because we're not saying, hey, you're being a child. We're saying, I need to speak to this personality, right? I'm having a problem. I need this problem solved. And the best person that I know to solve this problem is business Jihi, right? So I understand that you're in the middle of making a peanut butter sandwich, and I understand that you didn't get enough sleep last night, and I understand that you're really hoping that you get your bath later tonight. All of those things are valid. But for this 5-minute conversation, I need to talk to business Jihi, right? And she can do the same thing to me.
That's really potent. It's interesting how we bring these different frames of reference. You can snap yourself into actually feeling differently. Like I would never have used those words, but I can snap myself out. Maybe that's not quite the word. I can wildly diminish my anxiety, which has always been my struggle. I'll say the phrase, remember who you are. And what I mean, I'm snapping myself into what you'd probably refer to as business Tom or entrepreneur Tom, where it's like, oh yeah, remember the things I've done, what I've accomplished, all the like mental faculties that I have at my disposal that for whatever reason right now, like don't feel accessible. It's so weird that I can shift into that and I can feel small and scared and all of that. And then I just say that phrase and I'm like, my chin comes down, my brow furrows, and I'm like, oh, that's right. Like, I know who I am and what I can do. And so the 1,000 personalities, knowing that you're in one of these different ones.
You are those other things too, though, brother. Like I'm not diminishing your, remember who you are mantra, but I want to encourage you also not to diminish. You are all the other things too. You are still the 0 to 7. You're still the childhood Tom.
Is that useful somehow?
Absolutely, that's useful.
I despise those moments.
And that might be why the experience happened at all. And some part of that experience shaped who you are now. So there's a resource in those experiences. When you carte blanche reject them because you despise them, use a term like that, I'm sure there are things that happen between 0 and 7 that you don't despise.
Oh, I didn't mean the age, only that feeling of being anxious and
that feeling sucks.
Too weak for something. Hate.
Yeah, that feeling sucks, but we're talking about a feeling. We're not talking about a rational frame of reference, right? We're talking about a feeling. So as an example, in marriage especially, your spouse, because your spouse is the closest person to your secret life, perhaps your spouse is in your secret life, which would be awesome if you have your wife in your secret life. My wife is very much in my secret life. Your spouse understands you at a very deep level if she's in your secret life or he's in your secret life. And sometimes they suspect that what they're dealing with is some sort of memory, trauma, behavior, conditioning that happened when you were a child, 0 to 7. So they get the benefit of being able to call that out if that's what's happening, or if they suspect that's what's happening, when you engage in that kind of openness and say, this is what I was like as a kid. For me, I was always competing for attention, my mom's attention, because my mom was a single mom. She was working 2 jobs, sometimes 3. She was going to school. I spent a lot of time with my grandma. All I wanted was mom, because what does every child under the age of 7 want? Mom. They say they want dad sometimes, but they want mom. They want that nurturing, loving, maternal figure. And I didn't have that very often. So I learned very young that I had to compete to get mom's attention, and that competing to get mom's negative attention was not a good way of doing it. So acting out was not productive. Instead, I had to excel. I had to exceed. I had to be super helpful around the house. I had to be super independent. If I could get up at 6 o'clock in the morning on Saturdays, I could watch my cartoons, pour a bowl of cereal, be awake and be alert and be fed by 6:30 in the morning when my mom woke up, and she'd be like, Andrew, did you feed yourself? Good job. And what are you watching? And let me sit with you. And then I got mom's attention. So my wife knows that when I'm showing that attention-seeking behavior to her, to clients, to whatever else, she knows that it's going to drain my resources very quickly. So she'll call it out. She'll be like, hey, is this little Andy trying to seek attention because he sees some sort of opportunity? Or is this business Andy cultivating a client with biz dev or whatever else? And then I can look back and say, oh yeah, it's a great call, girl. Like, if I'm putting this much energy into a client, it better be the right client. If I'm putting this much energy into whatever, the neighborhood watch parent, then it better be for a good reason, because I'm going to drain resources. And when I drain those resources, who's going to pay the penalty? My wife, my kids, my staff. If you like this short clip, make sure you click here to see the next clip, or here to see the full podcast episode.
So fresh, so new.